always just like to set expectations and agreements of how we agree to participate within the circle. And introducing the talking piece as part of that, but I will ask if you would just look at these expectation and agreements that are already established by one of the classes in criminal justice, and see if there's anything that we should add to this. Especially as people come in and out of the circle, we probably should establish, if we're sitting here talking, how we're gonna let that person in, and people who have to leave the circle that are not staying for the entire time are able to leave. Would we restart if students are coming in, like say if you two had to leave and then 3 new students came in and we've already answered 2 questions, would it be okay to start over again in another circle with the students who came in, if we're able to hold that space until 4 o'clock, because they may come in and out. So that might be part of the expectation and agreement. One thing that we have up here is respect others' perspectives and be respectful. That was other students' voices that are coming through from class. The person holding the talking piece is the only person speaking at the time, and we are just actively listening to that person. It's student-led, so we are really honoring the voices of students that are here that are representing of their communities and this community. We're honoring the staff that's here that represents the community as well. Through writing and speaking, so we do want to save your responses, if that's okay, to save on what you've written down and what you are speaking. It is recorded, just the audio is recorded. You can agree, you can pass, you can disagree, you can talk and say why it matters to you, why it matters to the community. And if you want to add more to the particular question, we don't have to move forward until everyone feels like, yeah, I've spoken, but maybe it's gone around once already and they say, oh, I thought of something else I want to add because someone else I related to them, and we can go around another round. Do not take responses personally. Be open-minded. Give classroom feedback ideas that may not pertain to us, but we'll probably collect feedback in the classroom from students that are here of how the circle went. Our groups are in class, we work together as teams. That may not align with what we're doing here. We're aware of our cell phones and share the space. Time to write down the responses. And so what else should we add to this particular expectation and agreement? And so I'll pass this around.
I'll probably say to add a judgment-free zone. Judgment-free for your opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, judgment-free zone and Wells?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say like, I guess it falls in that same category, like, understand that everybody has different experiences and points of view. I just think, let me see. Yeah, understand everyone's points of view and experiences.
Okay, understand everyone's points of view and experiences. Not used to this.
Is it not?
I'll start with highlighting zone and go from there. Yeah, it's like it's.
Is it stuck?
Huh. What I'll do is I'll just continue writing it up here. So you said be respectful of everyone's, can you say it one more time?
Points of view and experiences.
I want to do so much more with it. So I'm just trying to highlight it a little bit so we can really amplify it. Okay, so a little on top of the other ones, but it's okay. It's kind of coming like a collage, so it's fine. Paul, anything else?
I think this is a good list.
Okay. And I can adjust that later, but this will always be part of it. I'll update it, but as we go on, I'll continually build on that. This talking piece is important because it reminds me of Bob Marley, Three Little Birds. Yeah, so it's like the messages are going around and getting shared. And I got this from a store that just has a faith energy in it. It was at a store that sells a lot of materials based in faith, and so that's what the talking piece means to me. And we'll start off with a quote. To open the circle up, the quote is from a law enforcement officer. He had worked in the field, I think, for 30 years or so, and he saw the last riots that had broken out, and he was responding to that. So this is his quote, and if we could just pass this, and you have more than 30 seconds since it's just here, us would pass a talking piece and respond to what does this quote mean to you? What does it mean to you? And it is an audio piece. Whoops.
To become great, to become great, proactive police officers and great.
Oh, it is playing.
Police officers rather than reactive.
Can you hear that?
These last years have disappointed me. They have broken my heart. The uprising still hurts. It still hurts my heart because truly I believe that it should have never happened. I believe it should have never happened if we were allowed to continue along the vein that we were in, servicing our community, treating them like human beings, treating them with respect, loving on them first. If we continue that vein, it would have never happened. But somehow we went back to business as usual.
Should I play it again?
To become great, proactive police officers and great, relationally police officers rather than reactive, these last years have disappointed me. They have broken my heart. The uprising still hurts. It still hurts my heart because truly I believe that it should have never happened. I believe it should have never happened if we were allowed to continue along the vein that we were in, servicing our community, treating them like human beings, treating them with respect, loving on them first. If we continue that vein, it would have never happened. But somehow we went back to business as usual.
To me, the quote means that if we just focused on humanity and really considering that everyone is human, that we wouldn't have had that riot that we had in 2020, but there's some fight maybe on another level that was not considering the communities and really the work that had been done maybe towards a more rehabilitative type of state. It wasn't realized. Somewhere in there the messages were mixed, and it led to this combustion of something that was heartbreaking. What is that quote mean?
I feel like it means, I feel like it goes deeper than that. I feel like if it was for the riot, it must have been something that wasn't justice correctly, and I feel like people reacted that way. Yeah, maybe it should have been in a different way, but since the people don't really know how to communicate with law enforcement in a respectful manner, it kind of went too extreme.
I'm not really sure what I heard. If it's okay if you could repeat it for me.
Is the volume okay? Should I turn it up?
If you can.
To become great, proactive police officers and great, relationally police officers rather than reactive, these last years have disappointed me. They have broken my heart. The uprising still hurts. It still hurts my heart because truly I believe that it should have never happened. I believe it should have never happened if we were allowed to continue along the vein that we were in, servicing our community, treating them like human beings, treating them with respect, loving on them first. If we continue that vein, it would have never happened. But somehow we went back to business as usual.
I would say if police officers were doing their jobs correctly, not taking or not wait, sorry, I don't know the word. Just kind of not being racist, I guess. Just handling things correctly while implementing the law, but not taking it extremely to a point where you have to hurt yourself or someone else.
Thank you. For me, what it means, and I think the part that stood out is like the proactive versus reactive. And I think what stood out to me is like it's really important for law enforcement to really emphasize building community with the community they're serving or being in the community that they're actually serving. Just because like I don't think that's happening across the board. Like in this, like often it happens where like a big incident happens, and because the community never had that opportunity to build trust with the law enforcement agency, things break out or miscommunications happens, whatever it may be. So I think it's really important, like for law enforcement to really emphasize the importance of talking to their community. Like it's like they're also a part of the community, so they also, I think, have a responsibility to be in conversation, be at community events, show up in the right way in community. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that stood out to for me from that quote there is like it's really important to build community because in community, things are gonna happen, disagreements are gonna happen. So when those disagreements or things happen, like if you have that established relationship, you're at least able to get to the next level of looking to address the issue in a more productive way. So I think that's what really stood out for me in that quote.
Yeah, it seemed to me that at the beginning of the quote, he was talking about how they had been working towards something. They had been working towards this more proactive, more connected with the community, kind of he used the word relational, I think, there. And it seemed like and at the very end of the quote, he says, and we went back to business as usual. So clearly there was some effort, it seemed, to create something different, but that when it really mattered, they kind of went back to the old status quo and did their reactive sorts of policing, which I guess kind of means that it hadn't taken hold. So I guess for me, part of it was this idea that something should become part of the sort of culture of the institution, and it hadn't happened, and he was disappointed about that. And if he's talking about the 2020, the whole uprising throughout the country, yeah, it was incredibly disappointing to see that. Yeah. But yeah, that's my impression.
Thank you so much. And so we can start with the first question. It's on this next slide. I just have to find the arrow. Since it's just us, you have more than 2 minutes. Feel free to share as long as you feel free to, you want to express yourself. But if there's at least, if there's 10 people, then 2 minutes each. I'm thinking of 20 minutes because there's 2 more questions after this. But take your time to respond. And you're just answering why does it matter to you and why should it matter to the community or to the world? and then our representative will answer the question. And you can feel free to answer all 3 questions if you like. And there's the first question. How have departments in California worked to reduce the risk of racial injustices by law enforcement in communities of color? Why it matters to me is I feel like from like LA 92, California is clearly aware of its history of hypocrisy, of trying to say, oh, this is the tapestry, this is how it should look, we have all these communities together living happily, and then you have this riot breakout because we clearly could see that law enforcement had a privilege, and in certain communities they are over-policed, and it brought police brutality. It created a culture that from still today, there's a lot of people who do not trust law enforcement, individuals that are Black women, Black men, and also that cycle of youth experiencing it into adulthood, and then people coming out of prison and having to worry about re-entering society. Is it going to be sustainable? So this mass incarceration type of feel, I feel like it matters to the world and to the communities because we are looked at in such a way that California is supposed to be this beautiful place, and then it's like, well, why are we still facing mass incarceration and re-entry? Hi, feel free to come on into the circle. We just started the first question, so if you're joining us, the talking piece is going to come around to you, and feel free to ask why this question matters to you, or why it should matter to the community or to law enforcement. And so I was just saying that I feel like, and take as much time as you like to respond, but I feel like just the cycle of this incarceration that has come from the schools, the youth being pushed towards being criminalized, and then going into juvenile justice, and then it becoming like this pipeline of energy that they get expected to go into prison. And there's plenty of room for them in prison, but the expectation should be pushed the other way towards rehabilitation. Like the expectation is, I know you can do what you want to do in life. The tapestry really exists and it's yours, and that's where the money should go from the prison, mass incarceration, schools. All of that funding should be available to the communities of color to find sustainable projects. So that's why it matters to me.
I'm gonna go back to something that you said. I know they do have a Boys and Girls Club in my community, and I feel like that kind of helps a lot. It keeps kids out of trouble. It keeps them busy, gets them their education, to get help on their homework. And I feel like it's good because, well, yeah, it keeps them out of trouble. You know, it gives them a different path in life, different options, different opportunities.
I'm not really educated on the topic of the law enforcement, like how they implemented that. I would say it's not really, like no matter how much law you try to implement, it's not about the law, it's more of like how you raise your kid into the world with like beliefs and ideologies and propaganda. So, you know, you can tell them, oh, hey, like, this is wrong, and this goes against the law, but at the end of the day, it's like how they were raised and how they grew up. And, you know, they'll still continue being racist towards, like, minorities or, like, people of color, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, that was part of the student. It's good to be here. I'm just thinking about the absolute cruelty in our current government. How can I tell my students to be model citizens when their primary exemplars are corrupt and psychopathic? So, and it's trickling down. the cycle of absolute corruption. So having worked in the prison as a teacher years ago, I do affirm what you're saying about there's already this expectation by the time they arrive in prison. This was a women's prison. One of the women I worked with was, she was in there for bouncing a check. But her husband, or boyfriend at the time, was involved in drug activity. But this is like meeting security prison, 2001. This was right before 9/11. So like, you can't imagine what happened after 9/11 at that place. But it was my first time seeing what happens when a person, depending on what they look like, what happens to them. And even if it had been her first or 10th offense, to be bouncing a check and then to be pregnant at the same time, brought into the system. And it was my understanding that she had also been put into isolation because she was asking for help. So going to the prison and working in the prison, you had to take off your bras, you had to take off your jewelry, you had to take off, you couldn't have any metal in there. And I can say up front, like it's that kind of, and then there are all those cases of women who are incarcerated, who are on death row, who should not be on death row. I've studied it quite a bit, so it's pretty overwhelming. All I know is that grassroots works. Having grown up that way and having seen it now as a professional, it is always with the people first. But it's a terrible thing to see what's happening in Michigan.
So me more so just answering the question, right?
And feel free to share why it matters and what
Yeah.
it means to your communities and answering it.
For sure, yeah, I can start off with that second piece in terms of like why it matters, or what it means to me. So, for me, I'm born and raised here in Fresno. I was raised around like the Roosevelt High School area, and growing up in that community, like my family are immigrants as well. So I think for me, like the experience that I got when it comes to law enforcement is like I knew that my parents were always like afraid. Like every time we saw a law enforcement officer, or like I'm in the car with them, like it was always like be on your best behavior, like yelling at me. And I think that those were my first experiences with law enforcement. And then growing up, I was like, I guess the quote unquote good kid, right? That didn't really have no experiences with law enforcement, but I knew a lot of people around me, like cousins and stuff, like they were getting arrested by law enforcement. So I knew they had a negative perception of law enforcement. For me, what helped me is that I had opportunities to go to like play soccer, for example. That kept me out of a lot of trouble. But I knew people around me had like those negative experiences in law enforcement, in school as well. We had the student resource officers on campus. So like I remember in high school one time, like seeing a police officer yelling at a young teen mom and threatening her that they would take her kid away. So like I always like saw like the negative parts of law enforcement, maybe not directly, but just around me and my surroundings. And around the same time, I think it was probably like my senior year in high school, where there was a lot of like protests against police brutality. And I think that really just got me curious and interested. So like I was involved with like different nonprofits and being local, connected to like the local community and just raising my concerns to the local police department here in Fresno. So like, mentioning the grassroots, I think the grassroots is really important to this because departments in California, as bad as it sounds, like they won't get as much work done. They don't get as much work done without the pressure of the community. Like there needs to be the pressure from community members and from community organizations to like all the elected officials and all these California departments because the reality is that they have this system in place and they don't want to make changes to that system unless there's that pressure coming from the community. So I have like this unique experience where I experienced that at the local level, but now I have the privilege of working at the California Department of Justice for the Attorney General of California. So the Attorney General of California, what he does is he enforces state laws. Another really big responsibility is that he oversees local law enforcement throughout the state of California. So I'm able to bring that perspective with me in those spaces. Whenever we're having conversations about building trust between local law enforcement and the communities that they serve. So, you know, I can only speak from my experience. Like, I've worked at the California Department of Justice. I've also worked in the California State Legislature. That's the body that makes laws in the state of California. So in those experiences, like what I share, like I saw that, like it took grassroots efforts to go up to Sacramento and let us know, like, hey, this is how these issues are impacting us. There's this bill in front of you. We need you to vote yes on it. And those experiences are really powerful. I can tell you, like, policymakers and people at these departments, they see data all day, right? Like, they're being sent data all the time. Like, it's almost like they're desensitized to it. Like, it takes people to go to their office to tell them their direct lived experience for them to really change their perspective. And I think that's the power of, you know, the pressure from the community on elected officials, including my boss, who was also an elected official, right? So, yeah, like at the California Department of Justice, there was a big bill that was passed to law called the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. It's also known as RIPA. So one of the, you know, RIPA did a lot of things to address racial injustice. One of the things that it did is it created an advisory board that is made up of different people throughout the state. So you have community advocates, people who have been impacted by racial profiling. Then you also have chiefs of police departments and also sheriffs on that board. And then you have the Department of Justice attorneys who are helping facilitate that process. So that's a really important and big law. You guys should learn more about that law just to know what it entails. But the RIPA Advisory Board, they're every year they're publishing a report to let the state know, like, this is what needs to take place in order to address racial and identity profiling. So that's a really big law, and at our office, you know, we're constantly working to put out those recommendations out to the public, because it's kind of something that the public doesn't really know unless you really do your research about it. So we do our job to disseminate that information and make sure that it gets in the hands of the right people to make sure that they address some of these policy recommendations. And then the other big one I'll say is the Racial Justice Act of 2021. So you know, for that one, it doesn't allow for convictions to be based on race. And part of that is that you know, there's evidence that a conviction has been based on race, ethnicity, or national origin. Then there's opportunity for you know, people to file paperwork to reconsider their case. And I think that's really big. At the Department of Justice, we about 2 years ago, we established the Post-Conviction Justice Unit for people who are fighting a case to be able to submit their evidence and claims and say, hey, you know, I believe that I was convicted because of race. It's not right. Like, please review my sentence again. So there's a lot of different opportunities or ways that the California departments are working to reduce racial injustice. There's still a lot of racial injustice out there. So yeah, I think it's a matter of making sure that people on the ground who are experiencing those issues are in contact with government, and government needs to do their job as well, like including us. We need to do our job as well of being out in the community to understand those issues more deeply in order to make change.
Right. Well, I don't have too much to say. I mean, the RIPA, I hadn't heard of RIPA, so that's a wonderful thing. I'm wondering sometimes about, I mean, at least for me, what this question means to me. I always think at the local level, like the local cops or just the cops in my neighborhood, you know, some sort of substation. What are they doing to work to you know, alleviate or work on racial injustices? And you know, when you see somebody say something about what they're doing, you kind of wonder, at least in the back of my head, is this just PR, or are they really doing something? I was in 2020, in the fall of 2020, part of a group of folks in this district that was supposed to rework the curriculum a little bit for the police academy. But I got the sense very quickly in those meetings that this was a matter of just cosmetics. You know, we had a lot of people from the state, from the chancellor's office at the state. We had folks in our own police academy. We had local police. We had representatives from the sheriff and the police and a few neighborhood organizations. And almost right away, the neighborhood organization representatives stopped coming to the meetings because you could kind of tell that this was just something that they were jumping through hoops and not really committed, I think, to answering that question. So I wonder sometimes what we need to do to, well, the pressure that y'all are mentioning. I suppose that's the key thing. You gotta put the pressure on folks to make what folks tend to treat as a PR thing, to make it real. So anyway, that's my 2 cents about it. Yeah.
So part of the expectation is if you thought of anything that made you relate and wanted to add in on the same question, I'll pass this around one more time. If you feel like this question is answered, feel free to pass. I just really would like to add that I appreciated what everybody had said here. It really did empower me in a sense to hear about the laws and to know that it reaches the students' ears and that there's this generation gap where we can build on that grassroots, like you're saying, and to really have the knowledge adding in directly to the community on that individual level. It just empowered me as someone who was like, okay, I can't give up hope. I have to have hope consistently because I do restorative justice, that we can build bridges, connect the dots. California, you can do better. You have all the universities. You shouldn't be investing in prisons. Why does the Supreme Court justice have to tell you to release people out of your prisons? They shouldn't have to tell you that. You're California. You should automatically be creating and saying this isn't working, this isn't working. We've got people coming in and out. We're all mostly family from communities. Are we imprisoning our families? And California should be able to work that out. But it came down to a shock when I went into the California prisons to say, I see all people in here that look like me. And I haven't seen this many black people in one place since I've been in California as a military veteran. And being in those diverse communities of veterans, active duty and the housing, and you see a lot of diversity. I went into prison and I was like, I haven't seen this much diversity outside of military, and it really shocked me to the point where I became a counselor and I got to see some of the records. And when I read the records, I thought this person is just in here for something like you said, for fraud, for allowing their boyfriend. I worked in the women's just for a while to come in and live in their Section 8, and now they got 5 years. For a black male having this one thing on his record that I thought, if you didn't have that one thing on your record, you could have the same job as I have as a correctional officer. And it made me hurt, like that one little thing is stopping you, and you're looking at me like I'm someone to be up here. And I thought, I didn't plan on working in the prisons. And so it shocked me to the point where I thought there are a lot of other great positions that students can go and seek. You know, the standard for people that look like me was way down here, and to where being a correctional officer was something, I took a detour to be a correctional officer from being what I wanted to be, which was more Air Force administrator, somewhere high, leadership. I'm always looking for leadership. And it felt like a tumbling block for me. And then if someone's looking at me like, oh my God, your status is high, I thought, okay, you've got a problem in California where we're at in education. Are you not believing in yourself that you can do whatever it is that you want to do? Because I did have the obstacles and the domestic violence or drama and things like that to have that setback. But I'm looking at someone, you got one thing on your record, you should be able to set your standard as high as you want. But it becomes this criminalization and this low expectation, this labeling. So I added on that, since we have such few but such rich, deep conversation. I'm going to pass this around one more time just to see if anybody wants to expand on this one question.
say like police officers or like law enforcement treating others the way they should be treated, I would kind of like implement that on me and be like, oh, I feel like I'm a suspect because I did something worse than they did, even though back then I didn't look like it. I definitely felt that pressure. But yeah, like that kind of like made me distrust law enforcement. I don't think I would be able to like rebuild my trust with them. I'm not saying like all law enforcement is like that, but definitely like not. I won't let them have my full trust in protecting the city, I guess, or like the people.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Yeah, on the positive side, we have a Clean Slate program, which people still don't know about. It's amazing. I try to tell everyone I come in contact with, because I think the numbers are something like 1 out of 8 Americans have had some sort of legal involvement with the so-called legal system. And then there's also the Clean Slate program, and then you have this new program I heard of over the last few days, where people who have room in their homes will be asked if they wish to participate. They will be paid by the state to house people who have been formerly incarcerated and are looking for housing. And they said they've had really good success thus far, so I guess they did a pilot program. And that was really interesting to listen to. I just heard about this on the radio about 3 or 4 days ago, so it was like last Thursday, something like that. And it was good to hear you all speak, because I didn't even think to talk about positive changes. See, it's amazing. I'm an Air Force brat, and my dad's from West Virginia, so we knew when we were getting pulled over, we actually knew who the cop was. Like, my dad has all his tags. He's a senior master sergeant. He would have been colonel at some point, but he decided to, leave. He has his information on his car, and we also routinely got pulled over between North Carolina and West Virginia when we were coming back and forth from college. And it doesn't stop. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, and it's like, Rodney King was just the other day. It was just the other day. I tell students, like, you think you're gonna get old, like, you gotta remember you're gonna get old. Like, it's 20 years ago, it's not really, it's not that long ago. But it's promising to hear younger people talk about what they're experiencing, and to at least have this kind of thing would have never happened when I was in college. We didn't have this kind of consciousness raising, or there's no such thing as a truth circle, especially in North Carolina. I went to a Quaker college, and one of 2 in the country, and they are built on one of the sites of the Underground Railroad. But it wasn't until my second year in college where they actually began to celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday. We had to actually petition the board of the college to have it instituted as an actual holiday. That wasn't that long ago. So the kind of hypocrisies and, it's important that we know our American history, and there's more of our past in our future. So it's good to hear this, and for me to be able to be in a position to say, whatever you're doing, please know that you have people here who support what you're doing. It's just really wonderful. It's wonderful to hear from you as well. So thank you.
I think, yes.
So I'll go on to question number 2. This is the same, but feel free to take the time that you need, just because we did have that space available. You're answering, why does this question matter to you, and why should it matter to the community and to the rest of the world? And so the second question is, how has leadership created higher standards for law enforcement to understand people with disabilities or mental health problems? This question matters to me because I've been inundated, the same time the last 5 years with the media of just seeing law enforcement interacting with someone who doesn't speak the same language, and then it's like a traffic stop or something like that, and that person, it's critical in those few seconds if that person has that anxiety, and they start to resist being arrested, and that resistance becomes life or death. And also with mental health problems, I'm thinking of individuals who are coming out of the prison and they're trying to reintegrate back into society, and they've been doing restorative justice as a way of life for 20 years in prison to rehabilitate, take on their own, their own self, it's like self-help, their own issue to deal with it, and they've taken that responsibility, they've transformed very far. And just how has law enforcement really recognized that there are some people who come out into the community, and then they need that space to still continue on with their restorative justice type of feel, and that their voice still matters, and they're able to practice these things they did in incarcerated, maybe very religious, very spiritual circles, indigenous, and then just to see that colorizing it also is important for mental health for individuals who are African American, that is led by individuals of color, and how is it supported, because it is part of mental health. So just kind of seeing that law enforcement kind of respects that space of these circles, regardless of who it is that's leading the circle. And I think it should matter to the entire community. What else? That's mostly all I can think of.
I do believe some law enforcement are corrupted, but I also believe that some are actually good people. I feel like some of them do actually have good intentions. I think I came across a video of someone getting pulled over and they couldn't speak English, and the police officer did like a translator. He was trying his best to actually communicate with the person. He wasn't being extra, but like trying to take it down or using excessive force. It was you just see like he actually did want to help him and wanted him to understand. So I actually believe there's good police officers out there.
I would say law enforcement helped by spreading awareness, especially with people with disabilities and mental illness. Also educating the people about mental illness and disabilities, and having like a language barrier, like you said. Yeah, that's it.
How has Big Shoe career higher status in law enforcement? Honestly, I think with this one, it's like this is a big one that I think California as a state have failed in like big time. Like there's when you look at mental health problems, you look at disabilities, and we're talking about like re-entry earlier as well. We have to also talk about the homelessness issue as well. Like if you see look at the data for homeless, a lot of homeless deal with mental health problems. You also have homeless that have disabilities that can't work, right? And then you also have a lot of homeless that have been impacted by the criminal justice system. They were incarcerated, they were in jails, they're in prisons, right? They're released, they don't have access to any resources, maybe already dealing with mental health problems, and what resources do they have to rely on? And I think if you look across the state, you'll probably hear about efforts either locally or at the state level that the government has taken to try to address this issue. But it still continues to be an issue. There isn't enough resources. The issue of homelessness seems to be getting worse and worse in our state. So I think this is a really big issue that I think California as a state is still grappling with. I think that some efforts, there's different approaches that people have tried, right? Some approach is provide housing first, and as long as you have that housing, then you'll be able to give folks the resources that they need. Other folks take the approach of let's just get them off of our streets and worry about the resources later. If you ask, it depends who you ask. You're gonna get different responses and different ways to address this issue. So I think, as a state, we failed in this. I personally think that there isn't enough resources, and California as a state has those resources to distribute out to community members that need it. But you know, budgets are difficult, right? Like the state budgets are difficult. Everybody wants their share. And every time like California or any state or any government, like whenever they're in a budget crisis, the first thing they tend to do is go cut social services, and I think that's not going to address the issue at all, right? I think that's going to create more problems. So yeah, that's what I think about when it comes to this question. In a school setting, like what I could share about mental health is like in my work at the Attorney General's office. In 2019, Stockton Unified, or actually it was advocates in Stockton who were telling the Attorney General's office like, hey, students with disabilities are being arrested at an alarming rate in schools, or they're being expelled or suspended at an alarming rate. And sure enough, when folks at the Department of Justice looked at the data and they did their investigation, they realized that students with disabilities, but also Black students and also Latino students were being expelled, suspended, and arrested at a very alarming rate. And since 2019, there's been a 5-year plan with the Stockton Unified School District to address these issues. And last year, it was reported that there's been the efforts that they've been implementing have been addressing those issues. There's still some issues there, right? But we're continuing to work with the advocates, the educational leaders in Stockton, to continue to address this issue. So I'll just say that in terms of like progress, right? Like there's certain efforts in different communities that people are taking to address this issue. But yeah, like students with disabilities and students of color are definitely being impacted on campus by law enforcement, racial injustice, racial profiling in campus. And that's one of the successful things that I could share. But yeah, I say overall, I think as a state, we've been failing in this regard. We could be doing more for sure.
Do you mind if I turn on the lights?
Sure.
Since it's getting darker. Woo! There we go. Just as a little bit of a, I don't know if I would call it a pitch, but piggybacking on what you just said, the Central Valley Movement Building Organizing Institute held an event here just a couple of weeks ago about the preschool to prison pipeline, and dealt exactly with the issue that you're talking about, and an agreement that was made in Bakersfield to try to deal with this issue of people of color, especially Black students, being expelled at something around 8 times the rate of the population at large from schools in Bakersfield. And Latino was around 3 times as much as students at large, which means that the Anglo kids were never expelled at all, hardly, to average that out. So that's, I think, an incredibly significant issue. I think this question is important to me, but partly because I think higher standards for law enforcement might mean maybe different standards for law enforcement. That is, law enforcement maybe shouldn't be, and I think people are working on this, right? That law enforcement shouldn't be the ones initially dealing with some concern that some business person has because somebody's camping in front of their, and somebody's having a mental health crisis. Law enforcement should be the 5th person you call. There needs to be other kinds of resources first. I certainly see that in this neighborhood, walking every day from Belmont to here to school, walking through 3 small encampments every morning at 7 or 6:30 in the morning. And, I look at it and I think, what would a police officer with a gun confronting somebody do to help this situation? And frankly, nothing. There would be no help there. So I think shifting the standards might be the thing. But anyway, that's my little answer to that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate everything that was shared, especially talking about the public schools and students and how they've been impacted and what are we doing right now to really make sure that they're not being criminalized. I remember seeing that video, I think it was juvenile justice, the probation officers were letting the students to have like a gladiator type of fight in LA County. And so I was really shocked because they were just, you know, already impacted population, already went through that same lock them up, get them out of school, and then they're in juvenile justice and now they're not safe by probation officers. So grateful to hear that, you know, leadership is probably going to be held accountable. We are working towards that and that we're able to have these conversations. I'll pass around one more time just to see if you want to add on anything else in here. And I'm just grateful for the students that are here and giving the time to listen to all of this because you're the future leaders, you know, so I'm just grateful to see this whole community.
I do believe that the community we could do more for the homeless, but I also believe that the homeless go deeper than just being homeless. I feel like a lot of them deal with like drugs that they can't seem to get out of. But maybe like if we were to encourage them with like housing and maybe have like a drug test and like just help them out a little bit more, it'll be a little bit easier for them to like to motivate them a little bit, you know, get them off the drugs and maybe they will be able to get the apartment, job interview, just get clean that way.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I just wanted to share, so the HCAI, which is the behavioral health for City, California, they are really ramping up scholarships for anyone going into medical field, including especially social work. And that's one of the fastest growing positions right now, one of the fastest growing careers because of what's going on. And I just finished my research project on community college students who are homeless and their experiences with resources. And what you just spoke to touches right on it. It's the manner in which we engage people, right? Like the humanity, meeting people where they are, dignity, the absolute belief in everyone's inherent goodness. And there's something very important about why we are 12% of the nation's population, but we're 24% of all unhoused individuals. That's the most recent statistic, and I'm sure that number's underreported. And the type of homelessness is now families, veterans. These are the highest numbers. People who lost their jobs. So all these buildings that are empty, you know, it's one of my policy proposals is that we incentivize property owners, especially the multinational corporations that own a lot of California, especially the situation in Saudi Arabia coming up, that we get involved with that. And I think, again, it goes back to grassroots. There's never going to be any change until people are involved. So, you know, yeah, social work, psychology, sociology, a lot of money out there for you can go to school for free. Yeah.
I have a neighbor who just one more little point, I guess. My neighbor has lived in a little tiny apartment for the last, I think, 30 years, and he's kind of a neighborhood character. But I could not imagine this guy. There's no way he could get a job. Nobody would hire him. I mean, he's up and down. He has some serious events sometimes that happen in his life, and other times he's very lucid. But I could not imagine him without a roof over his head. He'd be dead by now. He's in his 60s. He's got a fairly decent life with this little tiny apartment. And so I guess for me, that I thought I'd throw that in there. Here's somebody I know personally who is helped merely by a roof, and then of course connections with social workers and so on is also helpful. But anyway, I just thought I'd add that in there.
And so we can go on to the next question. Again, take as much time as you like. Why does this question matter to you? Why should it matter to the community or the world? How have law enforcement departments in California worked to repair harm of any perceived racial injustice in the community it serves? So this was mostly in regards to, it matters to me because let's see, work to repair harm of any perceived. There was this perception especially when the school year first started. Do you feel like you've been pulled over because of your race, or do you feel like you've been stereotyped in any way by law enforcement? And some people had responded, yeah. And so whether it's true or not, there's still that energy going around of this racial injustice. Like, how do we get rid of that type of thinking? And so I was thinking it matters to the rest of the community to think about youth programs that law enforcement can work with the young people in schools in a way that a lot of them may want to become law enforcement, but they have a particular, like I said, change, and they act in a transformative way. That the law enforcement looks different, but it's because the youth have been engaged in a positive way with law enforcement to really build those bonds as a youth. Playing basketball, some of the presentations after this from some of the students in Crim 5 is included, like playing basketball or having some kind of coffee with a cop or having this type of positive relationship with law enforcement. And so it matters to see the rest of the community, young people build these type of projects that could be funded or something like that, and then supported and sustained by all the other rest of the community, how important it is to keep those relationships going with the youth into college. So when we do have a law enforcement academy or something like that, it's a positive environment. It's an environment of transformational justice. It's an environment that we all can heal from and repair the harm of the past, and kind of getting rid of the older stereotypes.
I feel like probation officers do a lot to help. Like, people don't really notice it, but I feel like when they start working with kids and building a relationship with kids, they do make a difference with kids. Speaking in something I could say, my brother, who was in probation, he was heading down the wrong path. He was just a bad kid, people were saying. But he did have this probation officer that kind of stuck to me till this day. He did make a difference in his life. He did change now he did change his life. He's successful and married. But I feel like what did it was the probation officer. He built a really good relationship with him, and I feel like he actually got to him. And I think that's the start, like with kids, make a difference in the kids when they grow up, make a difference with their kids, start somewhere.
In my experience, what I've seen, or how I've seen law enforcement be successful in repairing harm is honestly when they collaborate with community-based organizations or like neighborhood organizations. I've seen it before where the law enforcement agency tries to lead themselves and just lead the conversations and just like really just try to take lead in like the outcome. And in those situations, like it was apparent that community just didn't want to show up, or they just felt like it wasn't their space. And I have seen some departments like utilize, like let's say community advisory boards, for example, and they let those advisory boards like really take lead in conversations and bring people into those conversations for authentic feedback. Those spaces are not always the most comfortable for law enforcement because people are going to be genuine and sharing their experiences, and it's not always positive, right? So, but I have found that those spaces are the spaces that are the most insightful and transformative, and hopefully that leads to change when it comes to law enforcement. But yeah, I think those are like the two spaces that I've seen where like law enforcement working to repair the harm is like not trying to take lead in it, but just allowing the trusted messengers to help them in their efforts. And I also think those are the most genuine efforts as well, right? Like, you could tell, you know, when the law enforcement agency is doing something just to kind of check the boxes you were alluding to earlier. And then you could tell when, you know, there is like a culture or a leader within a law enforcement agency that really wants their department to create change. And a lot of times with those leaders, like, they take the approach of, I'm going to connect with the community organization, I'm going to trust that they're going to curate a space for me to get valuable information. So, yeah, I'll say that, like at the local level, you know, at the state level, I mentioned a couple of laws that have worked towards repairing the harm. And, you know, I think the biggest thing is to acknowledge that there's a harm in the first place. I think like after, like in 2020, you know, during, or like after the death of George Floyd, I think that like it seemed that law enforcement agencies were really working towards repair harm in their own communities, because we had just saw something that was like just really horrifying, right? And law enforcement agencies, it seemed like wanted to repair that. But like it has been saddening to see that it's like the, what is it called? The momentum was up here to create change, and then like slowly throughout the years, it's going like lower and lower and lower. And now it seems like it's like the complete opposite, like especially when we're seeing like with immigration enforcement, like we're seeing a lot of immigration, and immigrants are scared to even trust their local law enforcement agencies, even though they're not supposed to be cooperating with federal agents. Like there's still that harm there. So it's like, instead of you know, using that moment, that momentum in 2020, like that it seemed like there's gonna be positive change, it seems like the trajectory has been downwards, and it continues to go down and down because of, in addition to like police brutality, you have other issues like immigration enforcement and things of that nature. So yeah, I think there's just a lot of harm to repair, and we just need more law enforcement leaders willing to just acknowledge that there's a harm there in order to have a healthy conversation. For example, like in a circle like this, you know, how powerful would it be like more law enforcement agents from the local and the state level are in circle together talking these issues out? I think that would be really powerful. So I think there's a lot more need for law enforcement to acknowledge the harm.
Yeah, I would say same thing, that acknowledging the harm seems to be the key thing. I've noticed this too, or it's been my sense too, that there was a moment in 2020, and now it's gone. The momentum is gone, or not gone, but close to gone. I've seen a lot of people, you know, in social media, law enforcement folks in social media, even defending the murder of George Floyd by saying, well, I mean, it's almost like it's 1985 again, where their own victims are somehow the cause of their own deaths, even though at the moment, at least, there was some recognition of the harm, that specific harm to a specific person. And now I see it almost a doubling down. I remember a long time ago when I was living in Milwaukee. I was just outside of Milwaukee, a little town called Shorewood on the north of Milwaukee. North of that is Whitefish Bay, and the nickname of Whitefish Bay was White Folks Bay. 98% white, that little suburb. There was a mall to the north, and a Bayshore Mall. And everybody drove through Whitefish Bay to get to the mall. The sociology department of Milwaukee, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee did a study of the number of pullovers in Whitefish Bay. 98% of Whitefish Bay is white. 95% of the people they pulled over were black. People going to the mall. And the thing that got me most, that is a reality, right? And then the thing that got me most about it was the absolute refusal of the police in Whitefish Bay to admit that they were engaging in any kind of harm at all in doing this. I mean, that's the thing that kind of gets me. And for a moment there, I thought we saw it in 2020 and 2021, and it seems like your initial quote that you had of the person saying, well, it seems like we're going back to form, we're going back to the way we were. I think there's work to do. Anyway, I think it's a very important question.
Yeah, I could add on, I just appreciate that sharing because it just makes me think of going up after 2012, after California Department of Corrections had to release 70,000 people or whatever it was because of their mass incarceration. I had a similar job change from counselor to go back to officer, since we're going to reduce the population, and then automatically you reduce the individuals who are employed there. But I was going back to officer, and I thought, well, I'm going to go up to a different state because California was shocking. It was very frustrating. So I went to Washington, and when I went to Washington, it was another deeper shock that it was statistically black people were only 6% of Washington, and then when I went to the Washington prison, the supermax prison, they had all of these black individuals incarcerated from Chicago, from driving through with marijuana. And so they had given them a sentence of incarceration for their marijuana at the state level, and they probably had to face federal for crossing the state lines. But at the same time, when I went in there, I thought, this is worse than California. So now what are we doing over here in Washington? But there was a momentum and energy of change that's needed, and laws were passed to legalize marijuana because it became a racialized crime. It was mostly black people being in prison for it, lengthy sentences. And so I was more motivated in 2013 or 14 to fight for that change going into 2020. But it does seem like that repeat of like the violence from LA 92 or 2020, it's like the communities become destroyed that the people live in, and it's like not like they go out and riot out into the areas where law enforcement is at or the areas where wealthy people are at. It's like it happens right there in the communities of like LA, right on Western, you know, up all the way from like Martin Luther King Jr. all the way up to like 108th on Western. These businesses were all destroyed. And then GPS was trying to take me around these areas. So I thought that these areas were repaired when I went over there, and then I saw that the businesses were still suffering. And then the SBA was supposed to be giving out these loans to black minorities, individuals, veterans, to establish their businesses. And it's like those loans were not directed properly. It was more like given to training of telling you how to do, you know, have business. So whoever established training got the funds, and the individuals who were starting their businesses wouldn't get them. And so I've really seen where that money goes. Does it really land into the hands of the community and hands of the funds of the people? So bringing awareness to that, being in a place where it's predominantly white and wanting that change to happen right now. I feel like we have done a lot of work over the last decade or so, just from that energy of some people saying it'll take 30 years to change the school system, and then saying, no, I'm not going to wait 30 years for change. We're going to change it right now. But being able to go out into the community, like you said, and have that pressure wherever we need to go, to have like a task of people who are willing to take that whole pressure, but in a way of restorative justice at the same time, and acknowledging what is that harm that has happened, the racial injustice, it's acknowledged, and the privilege that people have had is acknowledged, that they have had this particular privilege in wealthy white communities that are predominantly, you know, they know how to receive those funds and know how to put on the show, you know, that they are doing something for their community, and then they're because like even you had people who were getting into college, I don't know if you remember that, marking African American for their scholarships, but it was some wealthy people who were not African American, and being able, but they got benefited and counted in the universities and schools and took people's seats. And so just feeling that empowerment again to go and do that change, to see that we haven't really got there yet, but to the importance of still putting on that same pressure with that same energy, but this balance of we can have these discussions at the same time, so people will come to the table. Law enforcement's not going to arrest you. We're not going to attack law enforcement. We're going to listen and be heard, and at the same time we can record the voice and still share that voice of what comes out of this. So it just is empowering to me, so I'm grateful for this community. And yeah, I'll pass this around one more time just to see if anybody else wants to add on to that. And I just really want to appreciate everyone who has come today.
Yeah, just generally something that I always like to tell, folks that are college age or like getting to that age where like they're old enough to vote now, and like I think like civic engagement is a huge part of like repairing harms of law enforcement. So like that includes voting, that includes, but not just that, right? It's being involved in your community, volunteering for the local Boys and Girls Club, for example, or whatever it may be, because it's really important to stay engaged civically, and like understand like what laws are passing. Also to have conversations with your law enforcement department. That's a part of civic engagement as well, right? I guess like for the police departments, it would be like the chiefs of police. Those are like the leads of the police departments. Can you build a relationship with a local police chief or with a local city hall person or representative to talk about these issues? So that's something that I always like to tell folks is like civic engagement is a big piece of it, not only for law enforcement, but just generally for any, anything's moving forward. Like it's really important to be involved in your community because these actions have consequences in the community. So yeah, I'll just end off with that and thank you guys for having me in the space today.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And so the closing round, if you don't mind, I'd like to share some of the presentations from just two presentations that we were able to collect from the students in CRIM 5. I have to stand up to do this, but let me see if I can. Here is one. I forgot to mention that they are scenarios. Just so you saw the budget, you're like, oh, you got money. No, we just, we like to bring it to manifestation that we would be able to fund something like this. And here's the second one. They worked in teams. So this one kind of loops through because they had a lot of the written communication on here. So kind of let it go. But these are projects that, there's even more that the current 5 students work on, and hopefully we edit them over time, and at one point, we could probably go work with the California Endowment to see what we could do, and have a team at least that works with like homelessness or works with other established nonprofits, and we can go out and do some kind of work in the community. So,
So Crim 5 is what class? What's
it's
that?
Community policing.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah,
all
so
right.
it relates to your department. I share a lot of California DOJ and federal DOJ information in that class, and tell them to work as teams with the C.A.R.E to kind of master their particular position in that team and be really good at presenting. And so I hope one day, maybe in May, if we had a class that was willing to present, that they would be here as well and present their own presentations up here, at least 2 of them. It would be really nice. So maybe we can work towards that. And maybe next time, if we did come, we could even do this in the classroom. If we're expecting that maybe that Crim 5 would already be in class, and then we can invite other classes to come as long. So Crim 1 is here in Crim 6, and that's criminal law and introduction to criminology. And so that's our goal. So we're hoping to sustain it no matter what it looks like and keep it going for years and years and years to come. So to see it grow. So I'm grateful for this being our first one. So it's historic for me because I'm a visionary and I see more coming, people coming to participate in the work that we could do as a group. So thank you so much for allowing us to use the space.
Oh,
Thank you so much for coming.
doing
I hope to
this.
see you at the next one. Thank you. And thank you so much. I hope you guys continue to participate in this because it is historic to see women of color leading restorative justice. So it is, in research, it is profound that you are participating in that way. So I appreciate both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I hope I have more refreshments.
Okay, thank you.
Look at the budget. Let's see how it goes first.
Will you please stairs here?
Yeah, I'm gonna, as I do with everything, I'm gonna fix everything tomorrow morning. Okay?
Thank you so much. Well, I'll close up quick too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, you guys have a good time. We'll see you.
All right, thank you.